Welcome, Dr. Lewis.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you so much. And it's such a pleasure and an honor to be able to speak with this group today. As many of you know, I'm currently the candidate in the riding of Halderman-Norfolk in Ontario, but I consider the West to still be my second home. I developed a bond with Alberta, even though I was only able to take 2 trips there during the leadership race because of COVID. But for the few trips that I did take there, I can honestly say I felt like I arrived at home. I believe that my immediate connection with the province and with the people was founded because I felt that the people that surrounded me in Alberta shared my values. Albertans share a vision, the same vision as I do for Canada. The idea that if you want, that you don't have to wait for government in order to give you a handout. If you want something, you wake up early and you work hard at it. So when Justin Trudeau and the Liberals attack the Albertan way, I take that very, very personally. That attack is everything. It's an attack on everything that I believe in personally. Legislations like Bill C-48 and Bill C-69 are a direct attack on Alberta's livelihood. I know that many people in Alberta feel abandoned by Ottawa, but I'm here to tell you this. Although Justin Trudeau has tried to divide us, he has tried to pit East against West, regions against regions, city against rural, he has and he will continue to fail to divide us. Because this country was founded by hardworking people just like you. It was founded by people who value free enterprise. Values are going to outlast this elitist government. The loss of jobs in this province is largely attributed to people who sit in their offices and write policy papers without ever getting their hands dirty. This province was shut down by people who never actually visited an oil sands. If they had taken the time to visit even one of these sites, they would have seen with their own eyes the world-class technology and the best practices that are adopted by the oil and gas sector. These are the same people who sign petitions to plant trees, but never plant a single tree themselves. These people ignore the obvious truths that more trees are planted every year by the natural resource sector than by any government. These are the same people from whom we are fighting to preserve the soul of this nation. The fight is right here in this country and not in an international realm. And the best example of this is when we look at the Paris Accord. Our energy industry has been under attack for years. Even before Justin Trudeau's anti-energy legislation began to cripple the oil sector and the gas sector, activists were hard at work to kneecap this industry. But I believe that the Paris Accord is really just a distraction. Canada is the only G7 nation in the world that has implemented the job-killing national carbon tax. It was not the Paris Accord that drove $100 billion worth of investments out of this country. Neither was it the Paris Accord that caused over 100,000 oil and gas workers to lose their jobs. The Liberals want to divide the Conservatives by having us focus on the Paris Accord and not focus on their bad laws. If we continue to focus on the Paris Accord, we lose sight of the domestic policies that are crippling, like the carbon tax, Bill C-48, like Bill C-69. We must hold the Liberals to account for these bad environmental policies. Within the last 5 years, there's been 3 pipelines that were canceled. One was purchased by the government, likely never to be completed. Albertans are victims of laws that are passed right here in this country. But it is so easy for us to point the finger outside of this country. And I know that as Canadians, it's emotionally easier if we could look to the United Nations and blame them for all our problems. But while I have many problems with the United Nations, I have to say this: our wounds and Alberta's wounds have been self-inflicted by the policies of this nation. If the United Nations has any influence over us, it's because our government gave them that authority. We relinquished our sovereign rights over the environment, not through the Paris Accord, but because of national legislations like Bill C-48 and Bill C-69. These laws must be repealed. International agreements are largely voluntary. And with respect to the Paris Climate Agreement, it is at best an aspirational agreement. It is a non-binding international agreement that we could easily meet with our eyes closed. And all we need to do essentially is do what we have been doing and what we do best. And that is being the world leader in the clean energy creation and innovation sector. The Liberals are trying to turn us against our leaders, trying to turn us against the Honorable Erin O'Toole and Premier Jason Kenney. And they're using the Paris Agreement to do that. As an international lawyer, I can tell you with all honesty that I've studied the agreement in depth, and both Erin O'Toole's and Jason Kenney's interpretation are correct. While the Paris Agreement is an aspirational document, companies that want to invest in Canada and in Alberta, they want to see that we've incorporated environmental principles in our resource development. I cannot think of even one large corporation or resource investment firm that does not have corporate social responsibility components in their corporate objectives. Companies just won't invest here without some environmental commitments. And the ones that we have in the Paris Accord are very achievable. Our industries are amongst the cleanest and have the best environmental practices that far surpass other oil-producing nations. So why are we arguing about an agreement that we can meet with our eyes closed? Unfortunately, the fact is the resource battle was lost right here at home because we elected the wrong federal government. But we're not going to give up. I won't give up on Alberta. Alberta was one of the reasons why I decided to run for leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. I recognized that I saw the growing regional alienation, and I was concerned that it could fracture our confederation. Running for leader and the decision to run for leadership was not easy. It was the highest entry requirement for leadership in our nation's history. A requirement of $300,000 entry fee, 3,000 member signatures from 30 provinces and 10 EDAs, and only a few weeks to meet those milestones. I remember my first trip to Alberta. I attended a gathering with the MLAs, and I was very, very sick that night. I could barely breathe, and I remember completely botching my speech. Never happened to me before, and this was the first time. And I remember standing up during the speech in front of some of you that I'm sure are on this call now, and my head was spinning. And all I could think of was, please, please don't let me faint. And that night, I went back to my hotel room, and laying in bed, I had a really, really high fever. And that night, I contemplated dropping out of the race. The sickness, the traveling, writing my own policies from scratch, and then having to learn them so that I could answer questions on this new material, and the speeches in front of various stakeholders. And on top of it, sometimes I even forgot what city I was in. But in speaking to many politicians, I've learned that this actually happens when you're traveling a lot, and it's quite normal. But if that wasn't enough, the French debates. To this day, I don't know how I got through the French debates after only 23 hours of French lessons. But I made it through. And there were times when I thought of giving up, because I felt the odds, just like Alberta feels, I felt like the odds were stacked against me. And I remember the support that people in Alberta showed me. And I remembered the out of work oil workers. I also remember a grown man standing in front of me and weeping because he'd lost everything. And those were the reasons why I continued to endure. You are the reason why I persevered. You are the reason why I endured criticism and ridicule at the hands of mainstream media. And I did so for you cheerfully. There were times where I couldn't see the finish line. I remember at one point in the race, Peter MacKay announced that he had 1,500 volunteers. And at that time, I only had 5. I remember he announced that he had raised $1 million. And at that time, I hadn't even raised enough to get into the race and on the ballot. But I believed in myself. And I believed in the cause that I was fighting for. I knew that I was fighting for the soul of this party, and for the soul of the federal party, and for the soul of the nation. So I fought and I persevered. And in the end, I made it on the ballot. I raised the $2 million in just a few months, and I ran a debt-free campaign and won the popular vote on the second ballot. I want you to have the same resolve that I had, and I want you to have this resolve for the great province of Alberta and its future. I know that Erin O'Toole and Premier Kenney won't give up on Alberta. Many of you don't know this, but Premier Kenney was the person that encouraged me to run for the Conservative Party years ago. I feel honored now to be able to fight for the prosperity of this nation and province alongside the Honorable Erin O'Toole and Premier Kenney. We will continue to fight for a country where everyone has a chance to succeed. Although my riding is in Ontario, I want you to know that you are not alone. I understand your pain. I understand your frustration. I understand the frustration of the unemployed, the farmers, the resource workers in Alberta. And I will communicate this pain in Ottawa and everywhere else in this country. And you can rest assured that Alberta has a friend in the O'Toole government. And I too will do my part to fight for the prosperity of Alberta, because I know that Canada is only the best that it can be when it has a strong and prosperous Alberta. Thank you.